Hello, and welcome to Self-Care in the Sandwich Years. This is episode 3, and we are talking about a not very tasty guilt sandwich with a side order of resentment, both of which come up a lot in the sandwich years and can be quite hard to deal with. So, Mel and I are here to talk to you about using our own experience of the sandwich years, this period in our life where we have dependent children, where we might have dependent aging parents, and we might have a whole host of other things that we are managing in the middle of that sandwich: work, community, businesses, and all sorts. And it can feel difficult and uncomfortable and not terribly digestible. Yeah. I'm Lesley Waldron. I'm an integrative women's health coach. I work mainly with women who, in their peri to postmenopause transition, support them to feel wildly well and to feel connected and empowered to their own well-being for the long term. And many of my clients are themselves in the sandwich years. And I personally, I've got 2 children at home. I run my wonderful business, and I have a mother who lives down the road and has Alzheimer's, and for whom I am her main carer. So it brings up lots of things. And over the last few months, Mel and I have been talking and sharing and recognizing that we have a very similar approach to how we work with our clients, and that actually that approach, when applied to our own well-being in the sandwich years, is really helpful. And so we wanted to share that with as wide an audience as we could, because we want you not to let go of your self-care and your well-being. It's really important. Over to you, Mel.
Hi, thanks, Lesley. So yes, I'm Mel Wakeman. I'm a registered non-diet nutritionist. I'm an intuitive eating practitioner and non-diet counsellor. And I work a lot with people, funnily enough, in kind of age 40 to 55, with people that really probably have an unhealthy relationship with food because it's become their main coping strategy through difficult times. So whether it's menopause transition, supporting children, managing parents and in-laws, it's a really tough time. And we're not necessarily taught we're often not taught how to cope with this stuff. Our world often provides a silencer, so we as women find it difficult to speak up, to say that we're finding things difficult, and to ask for help. So these sessions, these episodes are here to offer you a safe space to know that you are not alone, but also hopefully get some value and some useful tips and some strategies for you. I'm mum to a 10-year-old, and I have my mum and both my mother-in-law and father-in-law, all of them around 2 minutes drive from where I live. And my mum is a repeated faller. My father-in-law has prostate cancer, and my mother-in-law has severe rheumatoid arthritis. So I'm kind of flitting a lot of the time. Sometimes it's really good and it's really calm and they're well, and then sometimes it's like buses and they all come together. But this is life, and I have loved the friendship that we built, Lesley, to know that we can put the world to rights and share some stories.
Yeah. So guilt is really interesting. I mean, we end up dealing with feelings of guilt because we don't want to do it all, but we feel like we should cope with doing it all, and then we're guilty if we're not doing it, and we feel guilty because we're paying our aging parents too much attention. We feel guilty because we're not paying our children enough attention. And as for our partner, when do they get a look in edgeways? I feel you might be worried about you're not giving the parents enough support, or that you're missing out on things. You feel uncomfortable about what you're doing. And what's really interesting is that a lot of carers, I think it's over 40% at any one time, and this is carers of those with elderly parents as well as carers of children, who feel like they are at breaking point. And that's where self-care comes in. It's only a small part of a big picture of support that is required and needed for carers. But it's particularly guilt that we wanted to talk about today. Guilt versus resentment. Now, guilt is an uncomfortable feeling. Resentment can really eat you up. Both of them are entirely natural. I can remember the very beginning of my journey with mum, or perhaps post-diagnosis, I felt resentful because I felt a bit like it was going to take over my life and that it wasn't fair because my mum never had to do this for her parents and she got to have a really nice time in her 40s with her, enjoying her children grow up. And I was going to not enjoy it because I was going to have to look after her. And that brought up some very uncomfortable feelings. I have a tendency to go because of all of the work I've done over the last few years, if I feel uncomfortable feelings and I can't work on them myself, I go and find somebody to support me. I have a great coach who kind of helped me rethink those feelings that I was feeling, but also notice that the guilt isn't something that I needed to drag me down. Now, Mel, you and I were talking about an analogy we thought would be really helpful here about the differing impacts that guilt and resentment can have on us and how we feel when we're kind of on the edge of drowning in a sea of responsibility and conflicting needs and responsibilities. You want to take us through?
So it's like we're imagining that you're in a swimming pool, you're in the river, you're in the sea, and you have this one inflatable under your arm, and that is your guilt. It's actually keeping you buoyant. It's keeping you there. It's a difficult emotion. And again, one of these emotions that we're told that we shouldn't be feeling, or we're just meant to shove it under the carpet and not think about it. I don't like to talk about these feelings as negative or bad emotions. I don't kind of allow those words into my vocabulary because they are such important clues. And we're going to kind of explore where this guilt feeling can come from, but it's there for a reason. Now, the resentment is what potentially is going to try and pull you down under the water. And you'll be treading water like you've never trodden water before to try and keep your head above the water with the help of your buoyancy aid. And what we're trying to say here, if this makes sense to you, is allow the guilt. Give yourself permission to have the buoyancy aid and feel the guilt. And we'll talk about how we can work through some of that. But if we let go of the guilt and we fester into that resentment, as Lesley said, it eats into us, it affects our relationships, and if that starts to have a negative impact on your well-being and your support network, it's like self-sabotage. You're going to pull the rug out from your own feet. So we cannot let that downward pull of resentment win. We have to find ways to work through that.
And I wonder if I can use an example from yesterday that I think might work, which was that my mum started to have a total, so anything, even a minor thing goes wrong. She feels like she's coping fine, but a minor thing goes wrong and it can tip her into really high anxiety and panic. And I can end up getting lots of text messages and phone calls and needing me to come and deal with it. And I could feel this resentment building because I also needed to do the school run, feed the kids, and I wanted to finish off a bit of work. So in the end, I decided to allow the guilt of not going straight to her as soon as she demanded. She didn't demand it. She would never demand because she has other ways. But because actually I could see that it wasn't an issue that was urgent. It wasn't an issue that was going to be life-threatening in any way. It was just triggering her massive anxiety and panic. And then that makes her feel quite unwell. But I decided that I would I would allow the guilt to go like, do you know what, I'm not going right now because these things are more important. So I allowed, the buoyancy aid held me up and I was able to kick the resentment off so that I didn't feel annoyed and irritated. I was able to go cook everyone's dinner, have a really nice dinner, allow myself to enjoy it as well without going, okay, I've got to go and do this next. And how annoying is that? But actually go and let go of the resentment, allow the guilt, and then go and deal with her later. So it's a very simple example, but it really helped me to go, the resentment's unhelpful. I'm going to feel a bit guilty, but I can manage that. It's uncomfortable, but I'm not going to try and get rid of it.
Yeah, it's choosing the uncomfortable, isn't it? We're often presented with really uncomfortable feelings and emotions, and we've got uncomfortable situations. And as much as we would like there to be no discomfort and just to kind of hop over those and then swim off into the sunset, that's not the reality. So we kind of have to choose our difficult. Can I share something in terms of it really, that just reminded me of something myself in terms of, so I am the nearest sibling to my mum, and I'm the nearest sibling in law, but this is in relation to my mum. So she fell beginning of the summer, and my brother lives 90 odd 100 miles away. It's not massive difference, but I'm the one on call. So when she fell and the ambulance came, I am the one who's kind of, basically helping with the firefighting. And the nature of her fall, she thankfully didn't break anything this time, but her rehabilitation has taken 6 months from this fall. Yeah. So when I was trying to sort out getting a doctor to see her, which in this climate is not great. So I was battling against it, put it that way, I moved her downstairs, making sure she did all her shopping, making sure she got her meds and all that sort of stuff. And my brother was going on holiday. So in my mind, I am pulling my hair out. And I have a lovely relationship with my brother, but it fizzles in and out. We're both busy. Okay. So I speak to him nearly every week, but not every week. And certainly we weren't speaking then. So whilst I was getting really caught up and overwhelmed in this, my thoughts were, it's all right for him, isn't it? It's all right for him. Off on another jolly, is he? Off on another jolly, great stuff. And I built up this resentment against him. And I cried, I spoke to my husband, and ultimately it was like, I just have to ring him. So I sent him a message and I said, we need to talk now. I need to get some stuff off my chest. And he was great. He was like, how are you? What's the matter? Let's talk, And I said, right, just take a deep breath. And I just let it all go. Just let it all go in a way that I just want you to hear this, because I don't think you really get it all. And I'm not really going at you. This is not at you. This is just me venting, because I want you to know what I'm feeling, because I haven't been telling you, and that's my problem. Your problem. But you didn't ask me, and therefore I'm cross at you for not asking. And so, do you see what I mean? It kind of ballooned up. And he was amazing, and we had a really honest, frank conversation, and he was very grateful. And we talked about kind of the three of us and our relationship together. And he was like, if I can be here, like basically offering emotional support. That was actually probably the thing that I was looking for.
Yeah. And actually it's really powerful. My siblings live overseas, but we have a WhatsApp group and a couple of step siblings who are really supportive as well. And every now and then I can notice that those little bubbles of resentment starting to try and drag me down. And then that's when we might have a bit of I need a chat, and I'll have like a conference call with all of them. And then I walk away feeling like I'm in a bubble. And that's something that's really worth saying, that's a lifeline. When we were talking about we're holding on to guilt and we don't want to be dragged down by resentment, emotional support can be a massive lifeline here. And it's not always easy for people to offer practical support, but a lifeline or another inflatable, perhaps a little unicorn, that you can rest both elbows on, that keep you a bit more buoyant, that allow you to see the shore and make a bit of progress towards it, perhaps.
I love that analogy. Yes.
Yeah. Having another, but knowing that you can. So I've been speaking to others where their siblings live further away, or where their siblings can't be involved for health reasons, and that can be really difficult. But for them to allow, my brother lives on the other side of the world, so I'm like, well, you are going to be responsible for looking at the finances. So I'm not responsible for that, and that's something you can do whatever time of day. But they're needing to, I'm like, how can they find ways of giving some responsibility, but also finding that emotional support? Because that's what makes a massive difference. And it's not just my immediate family, but actually friends like you, Mel, and others who are going through a similar situation and who aren't there to offer me advice that I find really hard to act upon, but who are there just to listen. And somebody the other day congratulated me. And I was
What
like,
for?
well, what for? And she's like, it sounds like you're doing a really good job of supporting your mum and supporting yourself. And I was like, oh yes, I really am. So that was another little kind of
Yeah.
buoyancy aid.
I remember my mum when she'd had this fall, and it's like a week later, and we're waiting for the doctor to come out and see her, and it was just really frustrating. And I went down to the doctors to advocate for her, basically.
Mm.
And afterwards, I came back, and she was on the phone to one of her friends, and she was saying, she calls me Melanie. It's like the only person that does, and only when I'm in trouble. But she's like, she's been wonderful. She's been amazing. Everyone needs a Melanie. And I was just like, oh, I needed to hear that, because this stuff is hard, and we do need that validation, don't
Yeah,
we?
yeah.
You mentioned with like this conference call,
Oh yeah.
and I guess I'm thinking, like, as a carer, often you are responsible for disseminating the news
Yes.
and the
Sorry.
updates. That's a massive job.
Yeah.
So you've created, is it a WhatsApp group
It's a
that you've
WhatsApp
created?
group, yeah. So then you can have a joint video chat in a WhatsApp group. Everyone can come and join in. And we haven't done it for a while, and I think it's overdue, but it makes it easier than me feeling like I've got to type into WhatsApp all of the updates on what's been going on. And again, as I said, it helps kick off the bubbles of resentment, because then everyone else is in the loop, and I get that little buoyancy aid of emotional support. Not everyone has that. I mean, it sounds like you and I are fortunate in that we do have a good relationship, both with our parents and with our siblings. But I do acknowledge here that it's not always like that, that it can be really difficult. And that when you go through this sandwich years, sometimes you can really feel like you're on your own. And that can build resentment and guilt. And one of the things I found massively helpful is going to a carers group, which is attached to a memory cafe. So mum goes to the memory cafe and I go to the carers group. But there are lots of groups of carers that might be groups for carers that might be run out of a GP surgery, that might be run by a local charity, or even the local authority. And it's amazing how helpful that is as well for gaining perspective and for again allowing myself to be doing a good enough job. Again, I think we spoke last time about trying to be perfect, and in that first role as well, and that actually trying to be perfect, there's this ridiculous expectation on women that we should be good at everything, and not make too much noise about it.
I mean, I am a recovering perfectionist.
Yeah. Oh, well done.
Thank you. Recovering, yes.
Okay, keep going then.
Yes. But I've often kind of felt this need, for one reason or another, to kind of prove myself. And I have found it difficult to let go of things. So when my mum fell, and that was really, with everything else going on, the main time I was like, crap, I can't do all of this. So trying to research to see what services and support were available to my mum and to me. I'm really glad we went through that, because now I feel much more prepared. If the likelihood is it will probably happen again, but in terms of, there are support services in terms of getting prescriptions posted or delivered to my mum's house. Now she's like, oh, can you just nip to the chemist and get this? Can you just nip and do this? And they're literally tiny tasks. Like, I'll be there and back in 10 or 15 minutes. But it's the cumulative effect of doing that, and then the shopping and being back for the school run. And so in terms of getting more of the community, getting the GP practice to get more community support processes, initiatives going, actually gave me permission to know that they were there, to go, well, that's what they're there for.
Yeah.
I don't need to do all of this.
Yeah.
And it was, yeah, kind of that sort of self-reassurance. I think it was around managing everybody's expectations,
Yeah.
but also
Yeah.
managing my own.
Managing your own. Yeah. Because I think that is the thing. I think, I don't know about you, I didn't see this growing up. So I didn't see my parents supporting my grandparents. So I feel a bit like, I don't know, it's like a new role and I don't know what it looks like. And so I think I'm in various forums and things, and sometimes I'm like, oh my God, these people are sacrificing their entire lives for their parent, and I'm not ready to do that. And then I can feel a little bit of guilt come up. But we're trying to make it up, as we go along. And I think that's really powerful. That is another security aid, another lifeline that we throw to ourselves in the deep end, is asking for support. And I have had to advocate hard, just like you, because once you get this diagnosis, you're kind of, there you go.
Yeah.
Because there's not a lot you can do, really. And there are various services out there, but you need to find them and access them. And for a while, I felt guilty that I wasn't taking my mother to every single one of them. There's this cognitive stimulation therapy that's supposed to be really good for kind of slowing down the kind of breakdown of, connections in the brain. Or there's this specialist group, there's a singing group, and there's a tea dance and all this kind of things. They're all at the same time as the flipping school run, every single one of them, and so and in completely the wrong direction. But I felt guilty about not doing them. And then but guilty in an unhelpful way. It was like a buoyancy aid that kept going underwater, and you're kind of just almost drowning. And then I think I had a conversation with somebody who made me recognize that all of the other things that I put in place for my mum, with carers, with groups that she was going to, with reminders, were just as good as, if not better than, all of those other groups. And so that helped my guilt with a little mindset shift, because I was still feeling a bit guilty, even though I thought I'd put it to bed a few months ago. And then I had a conversation with somebody who made me go, actually, it was a social worker. Because I was good, because I keep asking, how much more can I do? And she was just like, no, you're doing all of the right things. I was like, oh, am I? Oh, okay. And that was really helpful. But it was, as I was advocating for my mother, it allowed the space to go, actually, you're doing enough.
It's so important to talk about
I
this,
think
isn't it?
I think we feel like we need to do it all, and it's just not possible. It's exhausting to think about. So boundaries, which I think comes up every episode.
I think with boundaries, there's something around, if people have a problem with them, then it reaffirms that they were absolutely the right thing to put in place. In terms of, it's not about you, it's about other people's stuff. And I did have a conversation with my mum, and I said, I'm struggling, I can't cope with all of this. And I felt a failure, because I had watched my mum support her parents.
Okay.
So when we used to live a different part of the world, in this country, so my mum's mum had osteoporosis, and she was of a generation where she was like, well, that's it. She went to bed. So that was what she did. So she was bedridden. And I remember my mum was a primary school teacher, and she worked. So when I came home from school, I'd often go around there because my mum was around there. And my granddad, bless him, lived till he was about 85, and he died from leukemia. But I remember she was looking after both of them.
Wow.
And I know how difficult it was. But there's something around, and I've not really heard that necessarily from my mum, but the conversation in general is, your parents look after you when you grow up, so it's time to turn the tables. And it's almost like our duty and responsibility to become their carer. And I don't agree.
No, and actually it's something that's definitely a thought that's gone round and round in my head. Is this my duty? And it isn't my duty to sacrifice my whole life to this. perhaps there's an element of duty in ensuring that mum's got the right care and ensuring that she is well supported. But yeah, just feel like, yes, but you bring your children up into the world in order for them to go off and live their lives. And if we lived in a different kind of community, then it wouldn't necessarily be only your children looking after you, it would be your whole community looking after you as you age. And so, we can try and create that community for our parents, but we cannot be the only thing. And I think, I think about my experience now, and there is no way that I want my children to go through this. Absolutely no way. And so that makes me think, well, there's no way that mum would really want me to be sacrificing everything. Anyway. And I've had to have difficult conversations with her, which is always tricky because I don't know how much she will remember. But that's that's mainly been around needing her to accept the carer's support, because I needed that in order to not crumble, and she found that quite hard to hear. And now they're her best friends, so it's all good.
Yeah. But this is, I think, these conversations around kind of talking about how this is going to affect. So in terms of your family, like to talk to my mum in terms of, I still need to kind of allocate my time for my son and my husband. And I think I'm conscious of how she sees me splitting time between her and my in-laws.
Yeah.
But also about how I explain to my son.
Yeah, and that's really important. Yeah, because otherwise you end up feeling, and that can help with making that guilt feel slightly more comfortable to hold on to, or not grip onto too tightly. I'm not sure where my analogy is going now. But yeah, those difficult conversations with our children are really important too.
It's managing his expectations. Like, I may not be able to take you so such and a place on Saturday because I promised I've got to go and do this for Nanny and Granddad, or and he's been really open to that. I think I'm very fortunate, again, because he lives close to them, he has a good relationship with them. And now what I'm doing, the way that it works for me to kind of contribute something and do something is he washes their car. So he washes their car, which makes him feel good. He gets a bit of pocket money. It helps them out. I go and have a cup of tea with them, and it's like a win-win situation.
Oh, I like that.
He is a little soldier. Yeah,
that is a nice strategy, actually. Oh, I'm gonna put that in my pocket. I love these conversations, and I hope those listening can feel the same. I feel like I need to put that little idea in my pocket and brew it, or maybe in a cup of tea. But just to see if I can think of something similar, because my children definitely have some resentment around my mother, and I have to say it feels a bit like, and what it does to me, and how I'm not 100% always 100% present for them, and that my temper can sometimes be shorter than I might like. Working on that though, it's been much better. I've got a whole host of strategies I've been putting into place, which I have shared at various points. But
the other thing we do is baking. So I will bake, maybe it's cookies or a cake. So we get to do that, and then we take a slice round to Nanny and Granddad, or we give a slice to my mum, or my mum will come and get a slice. And so sometimes it's just, they love to see that, and it's, oh, that's the best cake I've had, and he's like, oh, I'm such a cool baker, and I've spent time with him, and so it's just, sometimes.
Oh, that idea as well, Mel.
Food
always works. Yeah.
Especially cake.
Especially cake. Yeah, my son's very good at flapjacks. I'm going to get him onto that. But it is, I mean, none of this is easy, and it's difficult. And I think that's where we're coming to with this guilt sandwich, is that we need to think about those difficult emotions and work out both strategy, acknowledge them first. Like, we can't just go, right, I've got guilt and I need to deal with it, and I will see if I can put a sticking plaster on top of it to get rid of it, or I can just take it away. But it's part of what's keeping us afloat, and it's part of what's stopping resentment dragging us down as well. So yeah, acknowledging that it feels uncomfortable at times, that there is guilt, but not letting ourselves be overtaken by it and
And
having
it will pass. These uncomfortable things will often pass. We don't want to get to the place of resentment, which can often lead to shame. And
yeah,
that's kind of all encompassing. So if we can even just kind of reassure ourselves, it's normal to feel this.
absolutely. And I think sometimes guilt can be a useful indicator that things are a little bit out of balance, or that an indicator of where you might need to shift and change things. And one thing I say was like, I've got some really great friends who've known me a very long time, and one in particular who I can talk to, and she will say, you know, I can have her in my head and go, what would Shirley say to me if about this guilt? What would she say to me? And it would really, and it really helps me go, actually get into the nub of that, into the nub of what is underneath that. And actually, sometimes you just would need that little, gosh, yeah, I bet that feels hard and uncomfortable. Don't need it to be dealt with. It just needs to be hard and uncomfortable, acknowledged. And then that actually starts to make it feel slightly more comfortable.
And I think having those conversations that just allow you to check in and look at your perspective in terms of, okay, am I a little bit out of order? If you've got a really good friend who's honest in terms of,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
not always stuff we want to hear, but it might be,
Mm.
yeah, that's not great. Or also in terms of, I think you're being too harsh on yourself.
Mm.
And then giving yourself permission to like let yourself off,
Yeah.
you know, in terms of we don't want sometimes we're stuck in the tunnel vision,
Mm.
again, things kind of catastrophize and it becomes much more pervasive. And again,
Absolutely.
that's not very helpful. So we sometimes just need to step back.
Yeah. And that's kind of what we were talking about in the last episode about kind of fight or flight versus rest or digest. Being stuck in these negative emotions will keep us stuck in fight or flight. And it makes it much harder for us to take those other steps that we spoke about around self-care too. So dealing with guilt and difficult emotions is part of that, supporting ourselves through this time, isn't it? So I wonder, in summary, we've got our slightly bonkers analogy of keeping afloat in deep water, and that although guilt can feel like a really negative emotion, we sometimes need to acknowledge it as our kind of, it's like a buoyancy aid. It is keeping us afloat to a certain extent because it stops us from being dragged down by resentment. And acknowledging the resentment and acknowledging the guilt can sometimes really help us, support us to find solutions, and finding other supports, advocating for yourself with a doctor, getting that emotional support, asking for help and creating boundaries are all ways in which we can support ourselves, and keep afloat, and maybe even get to the shore.
Yeah. Because we don't want too much reliance on just one thing. We're much more stable and resilient and like to stay buoyant if we have multiple
Yeah.
safety lines, inflatable unicorns, donuts, or a hunky lifeguard.
Hunky lifeguard, I quite like that idea. Or a mermaid. Quite fancy the idea of a mermaid coming. Given that I have some really wonderful female supporters, I think, I think if they could turn into mermaids and
Yeah,
kind
I'll go
of,
for that.
yeah, okay, excellent. All right. So I suppose what we'd like to say to you guys listening and watching is that yes, these emotions can be difficult and they're allowed, that to find your emotional support, find yourself a mermaid or a floating unicorn, find strategies that stop you from being pulled under by resentment. And sometimes just naming resentment is really helpful. Seeing guilt as a useful indicator of where you might need to reassess priorities, and just allowing yourself to be human, because it's not easy and it is hard, and finding the right kind of support and the ability to advocate for yourself is really important. Have I missed anything, Mel?
Not like I'm just like That's nailed it. Yeah, that's nailed it.
Right.
I'm going with that. Thank you.
Okay. So next episode, we're going to be talking about the stuffed sandwich. No, not the stuffed sandwich, the club sandwich.
Oh,
That's the next episode, where we're going to be talking about that triple whammy of dependent children, running a family, dependent parents, and then the extra layer of peri-menopausal hormones.
delicious.
Mm, so tasty. So until that time, let us know. You've got our contact details below this video somewhere. You can find us. We're both under our own names on social media. In most of the usual places, although I can't do TikTok.
Oh, I'm as cake over keto on TikTok. It's not just dancing.
Okay, I'm not dancing.
It's not just dancing.
And yeah, we'll be back in a week's time. But again, let us know, is there anything that you would like, any questions that come up, any pointers that you might want in terms of pointing you to some emotional supports? Just let us know and we'll see what we can do. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for watching. Lovely. See you soon. Bye bye.